Edgar Allan Poe, born January 19, 1809. He was born in Boston of two actors. His father abandoned the family a year after he was born. His mother died a year after that. He was then adopted by John Allan. Him and Allan never got close. He then went to the University of Virginia and did military in 1827. After the military, he wrote Timberland and the other poems anonymously. After the army, he tried living on his own as a writer solely, then worked at a journal for 7 years. He was best known for his criticism literature. His job moved him to Baltimore, Philadelphia. In the year 1836, he married his 13-year-old cousin, Virginia Clem, in Richmond. In the year 1845, he created The Raven, and it was 2 years after The Raven was published, his wife, Virginia Clem, died at the age of 24. After her death, he made Annabel Lee, a poem about how the sorrows of losing someone you love can hurt so much. He then turned to alcohol to cope for his feelings. He died October 7th, 1849, at the age of 40. The cause of his death is still unknown. They say it could have been drugs, alcohol, brain congestion, malaria, drugs, heart disease, rabies, suicide, or tuberculosis, and many other things. Edgar Allan Poe was always known as a romantic poet, even though he did look on the darker side of things. He is most famous for his short stories and poems that revolve around mystery and death. Edgar Allan Poe was considered the inventor of the detective fiction genre that later contributed to the science fiction genre that most know today, considering Sherlock Holmes. Some interesting facts about Edgar Allan Poe was that him and his wife, Victoria Clem, his 13-year-old cousin, actually had a very loving relationship. It wasn't anything of pedophilia. At the time, it was quite normal for a 20-odd-year-old man to marry his 13-year-old cousin. Now it'd be considered inappropriate. He also loved his cat so much. He often referred to his cat in his writing, and when he was writing, he would have his cat on his shoulder. It is often portrayed that he has a raven on his shoulder, but he had his cat. Back in the time, Edgar Allan Poe was an athlete. He was also quite handsome for his time period. But many mistaken him as a creepy, sunken-faced, dark, gloomy man that many people know of him today. He was actually quite a nice guy. When The Raven came out, kids used to fall around crying because what more is there to do in the late 18th century? So he'd play along, turn around and scream nevermore and have the kids run away. He was a very nice man. But most people often mistaken him for a gloomy, sunken-faced weirdo. It was many, many a year ago in a kingdom by the sea that a maiden there loved whom you know by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maiden she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child and she was a child in this kingdom by the sea. But we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabel Lee. With a love that winged seraphs of heaven coveted her and me. And this was the reason that long ago, in this kingdom by the sea, a wind blew out, chilling my beautiful Annabel Lee, so that her high-born kingsmen came and bore her away from me, to shut her in a sepulchre in the kingdom by the sea. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, when envying her and me. Yes, that's the reason that the wind came out of the cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. But our love was stronger by far than the love of those who were older than we, of many far wiser than we. And neither the angels in heaven above, nor the demons down under the sea, could ever decipher my soul from the soul of beautiful Annabel Lee. From the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabelle Lee. And the stars never rise, but I feel the bright eyes of my beautiful Annabelle Lee. And so, the night tide, I lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in her sepulchre by the sea, in her tomb by the surrounding sea. It was the last poem Edgar Allan Poe had written before his death in 1849. He sold the rights while he was still alive, but it was not published until his death. As many women in his life has died, including his young wife who died 2 years before him, Annabelle Lee was no exception of the fact that he wrote many of his stories about the women in his life dying. Since the poem was written after Poe's wife's death, it is believed that it was written for her. The poem itself is narrated by a young man who describes himself as a child. The man falls in love with a young woman named Annabelle Lee, living in a kingdom near the sea. The narrator and Annabelle Lee were very in love, and the angels in heaven got jealous and sent a chilling wind down to kill her. He believes that his soul was inseparable from her, so every night he'd dream of her and lay next to her in her tomb. In the poem Annabelle Lee, there are a couple themes. One is of love, of course, between the narrator and Annabelle Lee herself. He loves her and she loves him, and nothing can separate them until death do they part. But he took that non-figuratively, and he refused to separate her, so he slept next to her in her tomb while she was dead because he never wanted to part from her because he loved her so dearly. The other theme is the angels being envious of their love. Since their love was so great, the angels in the heaven found envy and jealous upon them, so they sent the wind to kill her in hopes of separating them so then they wouldn't have to see their love. It is similar to a ballad. In addition to a different rhythm pattern in each poem's 6 stanzas, Edgar Allan Poe repeats a lot of words. The effect of the structure of a poem, this causes to linger in the reader's mind. Once the biggest rhythm in the poem of love interest's name. Annabelle Lee, the location of the poem, the kingdom, and Annabelle Lee's tomb are described as being by the sea, surrounded by the sea, or in generally. Edgar Allan Poe was most known for his short stories and poems. At the time, most works of literature were generalized, but Poe kept his specific. Poe was also the principal forerunner of the art for art's sake in the 19th century. In his work, Poe showed a high command of language and technique, also an original imagination. Edgar Allan Poe's poetry and short stories influenced the French symbolists of the late 19th century, which altered the direction of the modern literature. Most all of Edgar Allan Poe's work was not used to the traditional sense of iambic pentameter. Although his poem alone, he used iambic tetrameter, which is the exact same thing, but instead of using 4 beats, it uses 5. From childhood hour I have not been, as others were I have not seen. As others saw I could not bring my passion from a common spring. From the same source I have not taken, my sorrow I could not awaken. My heart to joy at the same tone, and all I've loved alone. Then in my childhood the dawn of a most stormy life was drawn. From every depth of good and ill, the mystery which binds me still. From the torrent or the foundation, from the red cliff of the mountain. From the red sun that round and rolled, it is the autumn tint of gold. From the lightning in the sky as it passed me flying by, from the thunder and the storm, and the cloud that took the form, when the rest of heaven was blue, of a demon in my view. Edgar Allan Poe's alone follows iambic tetrameter, in every 2 lines forming a rhymic couplet, which is when the last 2 words of each sentence rhyme. In the poem, the narrator sees things from a different light as others. Others see them as light-hearted. He sees them in a darker sense. His unique outlook on things brought him mental pain that was genius. His sorrow was like a room he could not escape. Even in the things he loved make him feel alone. His right or wrong answers, his good or bad decisions, followed him like a cloud-like haze. He could not escape it. It says the rest of heaven, and he means the rest of humanity, everything except him, and that he would be left out and forever alone with his sadness. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.